China didn't just build a better car. They made the entire Western auto industry admit something it spent a decade refusing to say. The price, the technology, the software, none of that is the real story. The real story is what had to collapse first for all of that to be possible. And once you see what that is, the way you look at every car brand, not just Chinese ones, changes permanently. Reject the obvious framing immediately. This is not BYD versus Tesla. This is not one Chinese sedan getting a good review in a European magazine. This is an entire manufacturing and technology ecosystem that reorganized itself faster than legacy competitors could update their strategic plans. Europe's automakers, Japan's precision manufacturers, American brands with a century of identity. None of them are spectators. All of them are now in a race they did not train for, against a competitor that didn't ask permission to start. Second question, planted now, not answered yet. Why can't legacy players simply copy the strategy? They have capital, they have engineers, they have brand recognition that took generations to build. So what is the actual barrier? The answer requires first understanding what the strategy really is, which is not what it looks like on the surface. European automakers have relied on a specific concept for over a century. A car is not transportation. It is heritage, craftsmanship, signal. A German sedan is expensive not only because of its materials. It is expensive because of what it represents. A brand story built across generations, worth hundreds of billions in premium margins. That story is now under structural attack from below. And the attack does not come from a cheaper version of the same thing. It comes from a different definition of what luxury is. In the new definition, the one being written in Chinese showrooms right now, luxury is the quality of the screen, the responsiveness of the voice system, the smoothness of over-the-air updates, the integration between the vehicle and the rest of a digital life, software-defined luxury. And in software, heritage is worthless. Nobody pays a premium for a word processor because the company once made excellent typewriters. What happens to a brand whose entire pricing architecture rests on a story when enough buyers stop finding the story worth the price? That question is not rhetorical. It is being answered right now in registration data across several European and Southeast Asian markets, and the trend line is not moving in a flattering direction for the incumbents. Here is where the "how is this possible" feeling becomes unavoidable. Look at the specification sheets of Chinese EVs competing in open markets. Driver assistance systems that rival what German engineers charge as costly optional packages. Screens measured in fractions of a square meter. Sensor arrays that industry observers associate with vehicles costing significantly more. Software update cycles that legacy manufacturers still struggle to match. And all of this, repeatedly, at prices that land well below where Western manufacturers set their floor. The instinctive reaction is suspicion. Somewhere, someone is losing money and the loss is being hidden. That is not an unreasonable reaction. It is also not the complete picture. The real explanation requires pulling back to look at the full system. Multiple industry trackers have documented China's central role in battery materials processing and cell supply, a position built over roughly 2 decades that now shapes every cost calculation in electric vehicle production. When a Chinese manufacturer sources battery cells, the cost structure is fundamentally different from what a European or American competitor faces. That difference does not appear on the sticker. It lives inside the margin. Add vertical integration. In many Chinese EV companies, design, software, manufacturing, and supply are compressed into a single organizational structure. That removes the friction and the margin extraction of the Western supplier model. Then add domestic competition. The Chinese EV market is not a protected oligopoly. It is one of the most ferociously contested automotive markets on Earth. That competition accelerates iteration at a pace external observers consistently underestimate. Government policy has played a role in infrastructure, in early subsidies, in market access conditions. But reducing the entire story to state support misses what was built underneath. The policy was the foundation. The industrial competency that grew on top of it is the actual threat. So why can't legacy players copy it? Because the strategy is not a policy. It is a 20-year accumulation of supply chain position, software culture, engineering talent, and competitive pressure that cannot be purchased in a quarter or announced in a press release. This is the point where the product category becomes genuinely ambiguous. That ambiguity changes everything. Modern Chinese smart vehicles are not primarily transportation products in the traditional sense. They are platforms. The vehicle is the hardware. The operating system is the product. The services built on top generate the long-term margin. This logic is not new. It is exactly how smartphones were understood once the industry grasped what Apple and Android had built. The device distributes the ecosystem. The value accumulates in the platform. Now apply that to a vehicle and ask the question that needs to stay open for now. If the real product is the software, who owns it after the purchase? You own the hardware. The manufacturer owns the platform. The manufacturer decides what features exist, when they activate, whether they cost extra, and how long they are supported. The transaction at the dealership is not the end of the relationship. It is the beginning of an ongoing, asymmetric one. Legacy automakers are moving in this direction, some faster than others. But manufacturers who built this model from the ground up carry a structural advantage that is very difficult to close. They have never thought about cars the other way. There is no internal culture to dismantle, no dealer network locked in by decades of contracts, no engineering tradition that treats software as secondary. The platform mentality is native. For everyone else, it is a renovation project on a moving vehicle. Now, the discomfort. Every feature described above, sensors, voice systems, continuous connectivity, integration, generates data continuously. The vehicle knows the routes, the habits, what played, what was said near an active microphone, what was chosen, and why. This is not unique to Chinese vehicles. Connected cars from every major manufacturer collect data of varying types and degrees. The industry-wide reality. The modern vehicle is, by architecture, a mobile data collection device. That is the baseline, regardless of brand or origin. The specific question, the one that regulators in the United States, the European Union, and several other jurisdictions are now actively attempting to answer, is whether the risk profile changes when the manufacturer operates within a technology ecosystem subject to data governance rules in a jurisdiction with different transparency standards. This is a governance question, not an accusation. The distinction matters. Huawei, which provides technology platforms for several Chinese vehicle brands, is a company with genuine, documented engineering capability. It is also a company at the center of some of the most intense geopolitical technology disputes of the last decade. Both of those things are simultaneously true, and neither cancels the other. This is not Silicon Valley behavior. It is not uniquely Chinese behavior. It is the way these platforms are designed to operate, and that design raises the same structural questions regardless of where they originate. The question is not whether Chinese platforms are uniquely dangerous. The question is whether any platform should have this depth of integration into a physical space where people spend hours of their day. And then the sharper version, if the risks are genuinely industry-wide, why does the discomfort feel more acute when the platform is Chinese? Answering that honestly, without pretending the geopolitics do not exist, and without letting the geopolitics substitute for actual analysis, is the work that most public conversations on this subject still avoid. One interpretation. National security concerns are legitimate when platform control and data governance operate under different rules, regardless of the product's quality. The other interpretation. Applying scrutiny selectively, based on origin rather than behavior, is protectionism with a security label attached. Both can be true at the same time. And that is exactly the problem. Return to the price, because what is happening here is not aggressive in the ordinary sense. It is structurally disruptive in a way that takes a moment to absorb. Consider what the premium automotive market sold for 30 years. Comfort. Available now across market segments, safety, technology, standard in budget vehicles, connectivity, now measured in screen size and update frequency, brand story, as established, under pressure, What remains in the premium justification stack that a manufacturer with a lower cost structure, faster iteration, and a native software platform cannot challenge? Industry analysts who track this question arrive at a consistent answer: less than it used to be, considerably less. In several markets where Chinese EVs compete openly, registration and pricing data shows them entering at bands that place them in direct comparison with mid-range European offerings, while matching or exceeding the technology specifications of those vehicles. The insult is not the price. The insult is what the price implies about the margin that legacy manufacturers have been extracting for decades. Once enough buyers in enough markets run the value calculation and arrive at the same conclusion. The premium pricing architecture does not erode at the edges. It erodes at the foundation. The loop planted early in this script, how can it be that cheap without something collapsing, closes here. Cost structure built over 2 decades of supply chain consolidation, vertical integration, and scale in the world's largest automotive market allows margin profiles that would be structurally impossible in a different industrial context. It is not magic. It is not sabotage. It is the outcome of a deliberate system-level industrial strategy that the Western automotive world spent most of that period underestimating. The consequences move outward fast. Tier 1 suppliers in Germany, Japan, the American Midwest, companies that built careers around transmissions, exhaust systems, mechanical complexity, face a structural demand problem that lobbying does not solve. The platform vehicle needs fewer of those components. The Chinese manufacturer often produces them internally anyway. Dealerships face the same logic. Direct sales, remote diagnostics, over-the-air updates reduce the necessity of the physical intermediary. Where legacy manufacturers are contractually tied to dealer networks, they cannot respond with the same speed. That institutional friction is not an engineering problem. It cannot be fixed by hiring better software teams. Now close the biggest loop, the one planted at the very beginning. The humiliating part was not that China built a better car. It is what the car forced everyone else to admit. The admission is this: the Western automotive industry spent a decade assuming that the threat would arrive looking like a traditional competitor, a new brand with a better engine and a lower price. What arrived instead was a different category of company, one that thinks about vehicles the way a technology platform thinks about hardware, one where the car is not the product. The car is the distribution mechanism for something else entirely. That realization that the competition had already changed its definition of what it was building is the admission, and it is uncomfortable because it means the response cannot simply be a better car either. One interpretation says this is the purest form of competition: better product, lower price, faster iteration, the market working exactly as it should. The other says it is not competition if the rules of capital, labor, state alignment, and data governance are not symmetrical. That calling it a free market, when the starting conditions were never equal, is a category error. Both interpretations are defensible. Both have serious people behind them. So here are the only 2 questions that actually matter for where that goes next. If a vehicle is objectively superior on every measurable specification, does the origin of its platform change what it is worth to you? And where exactly is the line between accepting convenience and accepting control? And who gets to draw it? If this pulled something into focus that you want to keep thinking about, the next video goes somewhere you probably did not expect.